I appreciate y'all being here. We have several folks from the Wichita contingency that aren't going to be here. But with that being said, before we approve the agenda, item B under new business items, the funding project selection criteria changes. I would like to push that back until we have a full contingency with the city here, and because they had several of the requested changes. So
Make a motion to table to the next meeting.
motion, did you get that, Bruce and Bert? Yeah, seconded it to table item 5 till the next meeting. With that, I would entertain a motion to approve the amended agenda.
So moved.
Second from anybody?
Second.
Tom? Okay. We have a motion and a second. And all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item B, the approval of the February 13th minutes. Are there any changes?
It's not working. It says Wi-Fi's not working for me. I can't bring it up.
pulled mine up.
Oh, you just gotta turn the Wi-Fi on, and then it'll be there. Slide down from the top, and then Wi-Fi is the top left icon.
And then if it is on, then how do we get to it?
It's a Polaris, Office Polaris at the bottom.
That part.
Me that didn't know what I was doing.
I'll take this one.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Polaris Office at the bottom of the icon.
Whatever it is on there, I'm not going back and look.
I have one, anybody?
It is, but mine just not has the Wi-Fi turned off.
Who else needs help? Steve, do you have a tablet?
Walk around here. What's what happened?
Who else needs one?
I just need the internet somehow. This is smarter than I am. So. Oh, there you go. That worked out pretty well.
Yeah, this one's not.
Up and rolling. All righty, so we need a motion to approve the minutes of February 13th. Okay,
Second.
Ann? Kelly and Ann. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item C, Director's Report.
Chair, we were asked at the TAC committee to show a video about the North Junction project. And the TAC committee thought it was so well done that we wanted to show it here for you to do. The Sedgwick County provided this video presentation, and I think it's very meaningful as far as the North Junction project's concerned. So with that,
I just wanted to make a comment. This is the unedited version. This is the long version, not the one that's cut back that's being shown publicly now.
oh, yeah.
So you get to see a little bit.
I-135, I-235, and K-254 were built in the mid-60s to early 70s. K-96 was built in the early 1990s. Today, over 93,000 vehicles per day use that interchange. Over 9,100 are semi-trucks. By 2050, over 160,000 vehicles per day are projected to use the North Junction.
You want freight coming to you, and you want freight to be able to get to the world. The people of South Central Kansas understand that essentially it's vital that we improve that choke point or bottleneck.
You have cars just lined up, stopped, engines running, gasoline wasted. It's not cost efficient, it's not economical.
Well, I thought we had a very good meeting with the Kansas Department of Transportation. We were gratified in the meeting to learn that the green phase, which is a foundational stage for this project, is a go, and work should be started, later in 2019. The gold phase and the orange phase to follow will be the phases where we really see some progress. But we have to start at the foundation. The citizens really to reach out when and where they can to both congressmen, senators, and state legislators to say that this is important to them. This is something that has serious safety consequences for all the people here in South Central Kansas. And we want everyone to know that we're working for your safety, but also to improve transportation and to improve what is truly a quality of place issue.
First of all, we want to thank Tony Giuliani from Sedgwick County that put that entire package together for us. We did take it to Topeka, first of all. Phil went along with us. We had representatives from City of Wichita. The mayor was there. We had Sedgwick County there. We had Chamber of Commerce with us and representatives from transportation. The secretary listened to what we had to say and committed to starting the green phase in January of 2019, committed to starting the design work on the next two phases shortly thereafter. So we're very pleased with the support that we got out of Topeka. We then went to DC last week and we briefed Representative Estes, Senator Moran, and Senator Roberts on what the project entails and that we would like their support. I know that Wichita is up there this week. That's why we don't have any of the Wichita folks here, but they're doing the exact same thing. And when we were in talking to Senator Moran, why he said, well, Butler County already beat you to it. They were in ahead of us. So I know that we've got a lot of support moving the direction we're moving. We do appreciate all the support that's happening on this.
We were there too. That was part of our, and we also showed this to our commission over there as part of because the part with 254 coming in and the number of deaths and whatnot on it going up to the North Junction is, I think they said 357% higher number of deaths on 254 than any other road like it. Be high on our mark too. But we appreciate bringing this to us again. So. Any other questions, comments? Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say, I think that Sedgwick County has maybe a slightly better version of that video on our website. I should say on our YouTube channel. That particular version, I don't think I heard talk about the fatalities and accidents, but the one we've released on our YouTube channel does make those points. And I think if you're going to talk about the importance of the North Junction and any other governing, maybe your city councils or whatever, might be good to show the other version of that video because I think it makes a bigger impact and why it's important. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
It is. It's powerful. I mean, and then we, of course, with us, we've lost several high school kids along that stretch of the roads. Bad when anybody, but when it's children. I also apologize, Richard Lemunion from the WAMPO board, and our condolences, and for Claire. He was a great member and very much appreciated. We certainly miss him and wish his family well. Please pass on our condolences.
appreciate that, and also know that you were represented, and your staff was there and present, and we appreciate that. And our mayor, Donna Clausen, who was the president, who will step into the mayor's role, he asked me to come here today, and then next week, our next meeting, I will bring her up and introduce her to all of you. Thank you.
Any other comments on the video discussion? All right, what else, Phil?
That's all.
All right, the consent agenda.
Move we accept the consent agenda as submitted.
Motion by Bert, second by Tom to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Public comment, anybody from the public that would here would like to address the board? For planning considerations. 5, new business, item A, action, move 2040 Amendment 3. Chris?
Thank you. Chris Upchurch, WAMPO staff. So here to talk to you about our third amendment to Move 2040. This is a smaller amendment than the previous two that we've done. It's composed of two main parts here. One is the WAMPO operations project. The other are a couple of changes that are based on a call for changes that we put out back in November, asking our project sponsors if they had anything on the plan that they'd like to get changed. So first, the WAMPO operations project. As you may recall, back when we adopted the UPWP in the budget for this year, WAMPO was looking at using some of our sub-allocated STP funds for planning purposes. We ultimately decided not to go that route, in part because of the amount of time it would take to get that set up. You have to do an MTP amendment and a TIP amendment, and then finally get it into the budget. Even though we're not going that route for this year, for 2018, we do want to commit to the first step of that, which is to add a WAMPO operations project to the MTP, to the long-range plan. This doesn't, it's not a final decision. We still have to go through those other steps before we actually commit the money, but this lays the groundwork for us to do that in a more expedited manner if we want to use some of our STP funds for planning purposes in the future. So the way we've set this up is we are only moving some money over from two existing WAMPO projects. It's not affecting any other project sponsors. We're just taking the money from these two projects and moving it to this new WAMPO operations project, which would be used to fund things like our freight plan and regional transit plan, the development of our next long-range plan, that sort of thing. So the projects we're transferring funds from, one is the Turnpike Network Contribution Project. This was in Move 2040 as a potential planning study to look at how the KTA functions as part of our regional transportation system. And we've decided to roll this into our freight plan that will be starting later this year rather than doing it as a standalone project. So we're asking to move all of the money from that to this new WAMPO operations plan. The other source is our air quality conformity project. Move 2040 includes a good chunk of money for WAMPO to fulfill its obligations in the event we got designated as a non-attainment area. Since our ozone quality has been so good the past couple of years, if we're going to get designated, it's not going to happen until at least 2020. So we're looking at moving some of that money from air quality conformity into this new WAMPO operations project. Now, there will still be enough money left in the air quality project to do our initial ozone modeling and our conformity determination in the event we did get designated sometime after 2020. So we still have that money in reserve. So that's the WAMPO operations project. The other component of this is a call for changes that we issued back in November, asking any project sponsors if they had changes they wanted to make for our next funding cycle, for the development of our 2019 to 2022 TIP. And we received two responses for that. One was from the city of Andover. They had a new non-WAMPO funded project. No WAMPO money in this, but it is regionally significant, so they asked that we include it in the MTP so it could go into the TIP. This is on 159th East, going from KTA to Central, about half a mile, reconstructing that to a more urban cross-section. Other request we received was from Valley Center. They have two projects in the MTP. And of those, their higher priority is this first one, stretch of Meridian going from Ford to Seward. Now, as this project has developed, they've found that the cost was higher than expected, and they want to move some money from their other WAMPO-funded project, Fifth to Main, move that money into the Ford to Seward project to accommodate the higher than expected costs. It just turns out the pavement on Meridian from Ford to Seward was in worse condition than they expected and will require more work. So this is one, while it involves WAMPO funding, does not affect any other project sponsors. It's just moving money from one of Valley Center's projects to the other. They're also scaling back the Fifth to Main project a bit so they can complete that with local resources and dedicate all the WAMPO funding to their higher priority Ford to Seward project. So those are the changes involved in this amendment. The TAC has had a look at these at their last meeting and recommended that the policy body approve the amendment as proposed. We've had our public input, had a public meeting last week, our public comment period. Nothing specific to these changes. We heard quite a bit supportive of alternative transportation and transit, but nothing specific to these project changes in terms of public comments. Happy to answer any questions. So for the WAMPO operations project, we're looking at a total of $1.2 million in federal funding, 1.5 for the total project cost. And then for the WAMPO funding on the Meridian Ford to Seward, what we're doing is moving about, it'll bring it to a total of about $2.8 million of WAMPO funding on that Ford to Seward project. Right now, it's a little less than half of that. And so moving the money from the Fifth to Main section to the Ford to Seward section will bring it up to about $2.8 million in federal funding.
These go into the mix about for when the criteria and whatnot, along with all the other projects that are there.
Yes, they would be eligible for our next funding cycle that we're planning to do later this year.
So we need a motion to approve the 2040 Amendment 3.
Motion to approve amendment number 3 as presented.
Second.
And, okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item C, Vicki. Unified Planning Work Program, Amendment 1.
Good afternoon, Vicki Ford, WAMPO staff. We are looking at, this is a 2018 Unified Planning Work Program Amendment 1. This is an overview of our 2018 UPWP budget, which was approved back in December. We have a total amount program of $1.314,335. And then we have the total walkable places for $1.6 million. And we are asking to amend the budget. There is no change to the bottom line. What we'd like to do as we go through this is just see that there are some changes in where we need to allocate some of the funding. Some of the changes that we need to make to the amendment deal with the policy body board members. We have Cindy Claycomb, City of Wichita Council member who replaced Janet Miller. Jamie Blubaugh, Mayor of the City of Goddard, replaced Marcy Gregory. And then on the TAC Advisory Committee members, last year there was a process where they approved to add 5 additional members to that committee with specific skills. We have Mary Hunt, who's the principal planner for Metropolitan Area Planning Department. She is going to be the Urban Land Use Planning and Development Representative. Dr. Jeremy Hill, Director for Wichita State University Center for Economic Development and Business Research, and he is going to be the economist representative. Rebecca Buska, Deputy City Administrator, City of Mays, and she is going to be the technologist representative. There are still two positions that have not been filled, which is the public health and the railroad freight representative. And I think they're going to work towards getting those filled this year. Now, starting with some of our changes under Task 1, Management and Administration, under the General Management, Clerical and Administration, we have a single audit. A single audit was left out of the 2018 approved budget, and normally it runs us around $600 a year. At the end of last year, we were notified that we can no longer be up underneath the City of Wichita's single audit, so we will have to go out and do our own single audit. And so that budget amount has been increased to $20,000. We originally thought we would be able to do a sole source. Since we had the meeting with the TAC committee, we were informed that we will not be able to do that. So we're going to have to go out for requests for proposals, and we're hoping to have that RFP out by the first week in April. Another change under Task 1, last year we had on our list to obtain liability insurance for WAMPO, and that was not done, so we're in the process of taking care of that now. We have currently budgeted $8,000. We are still working at getting quotes for that. Something else that we did not or was not able to do when we switched and pulled out from underneath the City of Wichita was we did not have the time to offer the life insurance short and long-term insurance benefits. So we're also looking into whether or not we can offer that to our employees as another benefit, because it is one of the benefits that they had while they were underneath the City of Wichita. So for right now, we have $15,000 budgeted for that. Under our professional development, education, and training, we have decreased the travel expenditure from $26,000 to $17,000, and we also decreased the staff salaries in that area from $30,000 to $18,500. Under Task 2, trends, we just, with the salaries, some of them were increased, some of them were decreased to accommodate what staff has actually claimed that they need for time. Some of this, when we put the adopted budget together, we don't know that until after the end of the year. And so now we want to go back and make those changes to the actual budget. Task 3, the data modeling. Again, we made some adjustments to the salaries. We had one increase, our travel and traffic demand model. Before we received back our RFP proposals, we had budgeted $50,000 for this year for the consultant. After we got that information back, we realized we need to raise it to $75,000. So, like I said, we made changes in some places to keep the bottom line the same, but we just need to move money around. Task 4, we talk about, Chris mentioned earlier, our STP funds. We had 5 projects that were budgeted using some of the STP funds. After finding out the process that we would have to go through to be able to use those funds, there was only one of those projects that has completed part of that process, and that's the asset management. So in the tip, we removed $25,000 of the STP funds and $25,000 of the CPG funds. They were both eliminated, and we increased the salaries for staff from $10,000 to $81,000. That will be taken care of internally. Asset management, we decreased or eliminated the $100,000 for the CPG funds, but then we added $100,000 and brought it up to $250,000 using the STP funds, and $50,000 of that is actually our cash match that we have to have for that funding source. Our salaries, we decreased from $25,000 down to $5,800 because we'll be hiring a consultant to work with that. Our systems performance standards, consultant cost of $24,421 in STP funds and $1379 CPG funds were both eliminated. Staff salaries increased just about $100 for that one. Our freight plan development, we had a consultant cost of $75,000 for STP funds, and that was eliminated, and the CPG funds of $100,000 were decreased to $50,000. Our regional transit plan consultant cost of $40,000 STP funds were eliminated, and the CPG funds of $40,000 was increased to $50,000. Those particular consultants are going to last for 2 years. So we're going to start this year, and then they will go into 2019. But for this year, right now, we just have $50,000 budgeted in each one of them using CPG funds. The multimodal planning, again, just a change in the salaries to either decrease or increase those particular activities. And our planning walkable places, STP funds, the bottom line stayed the same, but we were having to move some of the money around in administration. For example, when we pay the attorney who does work for that project, we cannot take that out of our CPG funds, and we had not put in a line item for legal cost. So I have to take some of the salary funding and take care of the legal cost. We had an increase in printing, so we just need to adjust the money that's there. The bottom line doesn't change, we're just going to make some adjustments to it. We had a public review and comment period from February the 21st through March the 7th. We received one question, and it was regarding the dates for the subtask 1.5 Title 6, Compliance, Public, and Stakeholder Involvement. Changes have been made to that activity to reflect the changes to the dates that were listed in the approved 2018 UPWP. This did go before the TAC committee. They did recommend that it be presented to the TPB for approval. And with that being said, are there any questions regarding the budget?
Nice job. There's no questions to be asked.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki. Appreciate it.
Our next steps is recommended that the TPB approve the 2018 UPWP Amendment 1 as proposed. After that's taken care of, we will send it to KDOT, the Federal Highway, and the Federal Transportation Authority for their concurrence. Once we receive that notification, then the paperwork gets submitted to the fiscal agent, which is the City of Wichita. They will go in and take our budget sheets and update the accounting software to actually reflect where we're spending that money at. So the question is the recommendation to approve the 2018 UPWP Amendment 1.
Or approve the request on the UPWP Amendment 1.
Tom? Richard, was that, or Troy? Okay, sorry. Tom and Troy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Vicki.
Thank you.
Okay, item D, ozone performance measures. Chris, you're back.
Hello again. So here to talk to you about our ozone performance measure. This is part of our ongoing process of performance-based planning. That's where we measure performance based on our goals and use the results to inform future planning. So the goal in this case in Move 2040 is to improve air quality in compliance with federal and state regulations. And the performance measure is measured ozone based on the EPA's standards and methodologies for assessing attainment. So speaking of those standards and methodologies, the way the EPA does this in our region is they have 3 ozone monitors. One is down in Peck, one at the Wichita Health Department, and one up in Sedgwick. And those monitors measure continuously during ozone season. What they're looking for is the highest 8-hour period during each day. And then they look at the 4th highest day of the year. So you can blow past the limits for 3 days, but if you go past on that fourth one, that's when they'll ding you. So we're looking at that fourth highest day of the year, and then it's averaged over 3 years, just to smooth things out a little bit. Now, if you look back towards the beginning of this decade, we were not doing all that great. We were in the mid to high 70s, which was above the federal limit. But as time has gone on, we've declined quite a bit. We're down in the mid to low 60s. So despite the fact that the federal government lowered the standard to 70 parts per billion, we're still underneath it by a fair bit here. So we're doing quite well. I mentioned this a little earlier when we were talking about the ozone, the money for air quality attainment. So we're doing quite well. We're below that 70 part per billion limit. And what staff would propose, and the TAC has endorsed, is to set our target at the federal limit here of 70 parts per billion.
Any movement? Richard, go ahead.
Sorry, Dan, I can't let this one go by
I
without
know,
talking about it.
I'm trying to beat you to it.
All right, so you're saying that the goal is to improve air quality and compliance with federal and state regulations, and the measure is to measure ozone based on the standards. Do we have any evidence to suggest that these standards set by the federal government with respect to ozone are related to health at all? Or
You'd have to go to the EPA for that.
but do we have any? I mean, you're proposing that we adopt this as our policy.
Well,
presumably, to state that we're going to improve air quality, that would imply that we think we have bad air quality, and if so, what's the objective data to support that?
Just to be clear, we've essentially already adopted these as our policy. They're part of Move 2040, part of our long-range plan. The only thing we're proposing to adopt today is the specific target of 70 parts per billion. The goal and the performance measure are already in the long-range plan.
Okay, well, so I would argue then perhaps we should look at taking that out, because I don't believe these regulations are related to air quality or health at all. So we put it in there, I understand the intent, but it's not really related to health. Let me remind people, so it's based on the fourth highest day of the year.
Yes.
So that means you have to be above the limit for 32 hours out of 760 hours per year. That equates to 0.37% of the time. So that means you could meet the standard, be under that limit for 99.63% of the year and still be out of attainment. That is illogical. Okay, now that's federal government, but that doesn't mean we have to self-impose or adopt those, I think. Now here's another thing. So I asked our health department, is there any evidence that, because there's a few days in the past few years that it has gone above the 70 or 75. So I asked, is there any evidence that those levels have created health problems in our community, increased health, emergency room visits for asthma, this, that, and another? The answer is no. So there is no objective evidence that the levels, even at 70 or 75, cause a problem here. Because let me tell you why. When do we have our highest times? When it's the hottest.
Or when the farms are burning off.
When the farms do the farming, or if you look back to the dates when it gets hot. Because
When the
hot,
you said what?
I had said when the farms are burning off their fields and it goes this way, that really affects.
Yeah.
Am I wrong there? I'm
One
pretty
time
sure.
in the last 8 years.
most of the time it's because it's hot.
So
The
don't-
VOC's in the air. The heat makes it happen. Okay, that's why they do it during the days for 8-hour period. Okay, the hottest period of the time of the day, because we worry about the days, those months, those years that we've had hot Augusts or whatever, 100 degree temperatures day after day. Those increase your chances of going up. Well, those are also the time when people go inside the air conditioning and they're not outside. They escape it. It doesn't cause a problem. Even at those levels, it's unlikely to even be problematic. And we have the wind, all these sorts of things. So in the end, we really have a regulation problem. And this has just been a sore point for me because, I mean, we're not like LA or some of these other places in California where you have a haze and ozone all of the time. We're having temporary, transient things caused by heat and very rarely, the burning of the things. It's not a health problem here in our community. And I can't support adopting, you know, a number that says, that makes sense that we can be in compliance 99.63% of the year. And that makes sense, and we shouldn't be spending time chasing something like this. That's just my opinion. I've had my piece, so I'll oppose this. Thank you very much.
Chris, is that a federal requirement that we have that in our long-term plan that?
No, this is one of the goals that we adopted as part of Move 2040. They looked at the different goal areas. One of them was air quality, and then as part of the development process for the long-range plan, they chose a couple of performance measures related to that goal, of which this one is measuring it using the federal standard.
Okay, I guess my question was, is the federal government requiring us as an MPO to have that as a goal?
No, like I said, this is one of our Move 2040 measures. These are the ones that we have decided was important to us as part of the development process of the last plan and adopted that way. It's not externally imposed the way the federal MAP 21 measures are.
If we don't meet that measure, is it true that then as not an MPO, but in our region, that then it puts into gear some requirements that we have to do something in order to become in compliance?
Yeah, so whether or not we adopt this particular target or this particular performance measure, the federal government is still going to hold us to the 70 parts per billion standard for ozone. That's the EPA's business. The federal government, in terms of US DOT that regulates our long-range plan, doesn't require us to separately adopt this target, but we're going to face consequences if we don't meet it anyway based on the EPA rules.
My last question, and maybe this might be towards Richard's point, federal government, doing whatever they do, piece of it, but the MPO would not be required, but individual cities would be required to do something, or the state? I mean, who's actually required? They wouldn't come to us as WAMPO and say, hey, you're not in compliance, you need to. No, they would go to whom?
Actually, they do. The EPA does. If we were in non-attainment, if the EPA decided we're out of bounds and we have to get declared as a non-attainment area, next time they'll do that is in 2020. They have a whole process for doing that based on our ozone results. One of the first things that would get triggered is that the MPO would have to do a conformity determination. We would have to model emissions from on-road mobile sources, motor vehicles basically, in our region, and take measures to make sure that the transportation projects we're doing are not making that problem worse. So that's the.
Well, based on
that's what
makes sense for it to be in our.
There's also
it would cause
There's also a whole host of other requirements that would fall mostly on the Kansas Department of Health and Environment in terms of addressing sources other than automobiles, smokestack emissions, and paint shops and other sources of ozone pollution. But there is a component that we would have to directly address as the MPO based on that EPA ruling.
Based on that, it makes sense to me why it would be in our long-term plan.
Yeah.
Regardless of how you feel about the federal government and how they, are claiming that it'll do whatever, I'm not, a doctor or anything, but because it would trigger something for us that would impact us in MPO, I would support it because we need to know where we're at, so why not?
Well, what are we going to do to meet, do we have an action? What are you going to do to do that? Are you going to forbid the temperatures to get above 100 degrees, or
Yes,
what are we
Richard,
going to
that's
do?
the plan right there.
No, but what I'm
More
saying
fans
is,
outside on the roads. I don't know.
we can put it in there, but what are you going to do to change that?
Well, in the event we became a non-attainment area, what we would have to do is model the ozone emissions from vehicles in our region. And if the transportation projects that we were planning to implement would make that worse, we would not be allowed to implement those projects.
But by having it, like you said, having it in our plan right now, what are we going to do to keep us below that?
Right now, because we're below the limit, the requirement to do the modeling hasn't kicked in.
No, that's not what I'm asking.
And so right now, like with many of our other performance measures, the main activity would be monitoring, to be seeing where our levels are going and are we approaching that limit.
Okay, so I guess what I'm asking is, do we have any control, realistically, do we have any control of whether we keep it below 70 or not?
Um,
If so, what are
realistic-
we doing?
Realistically, there is a limited amount of control that we as the MPO have. The city of Wichita is taking some actions through they have an ozone action plan run out of the health department, and some of our other folks that we cooperate with are involved with that. As far as the MPO directly, there is not much we do until we hit the non-attainment threshold.
Bert has a question here.
Is the 70 parts per billion, is that stated correctly, or is it an average over a period of time of maintaining 70 parts per billion?
So it's the average over an 8-hour period of the fourth highest day of the year of the last 3 years.
Okay, let me restate my question. Is the failure to the objective then, if we set it at that, we miss that objective every single time we go above that, or over that period of time? I agree we have to have it. I'm not trying to get into that one, but when you said it's a point in time measure, or is it over an average of time, that we have to really look at here?
It's an average over the 3 years, but then you're only looking at 3 days,
Right,
one
but
day
as
each
a
year.
goal,
But
if we exceeded on the hottest day of the year one time, that does not start any action for us.
It takes 4. So each individual year is graded upon the fourth highest of that year.
Understand.
Okay, so then you average those 3 years together, and then if that is over, so if you had 1 year that was 70 and the other 2 were 68 and 68, the average would be less.
That's right, so the measure shouldn't be 70, it should be the running average, so that if you have the lower ones, we never exceed our measure. Instead of every single time you go over it, my point is, and I may be wrong, but the way the bullet said is every single time you exceed that, we violated our measure, and I think that's what we're not trying to do.
yeah, that's,
We're trying to stay
apologies
in
if my bullet
compliance.
was unclear. We're assessing it the same way EPA is, so
If the federal requirement, if we exceed that, if we go into non-attainment, we have to start taking actions. This measure simply says, for us to remain within that compliance, we need to monitor a running average of 70.
Tom has a question here.
I was going to say, there was a 3-year period about 4 years ago that ended that Wichita wrote a letter to EPA asking forgiveness because we exceeded 3 years in a row. And there was no action taken other than that letter started and us looking at it. And I think that these performance goals, as they were related, the way I understand them, is to keep the attention in the 2040 plan. And they're setting the goal to remind people that it's 70. I mean, it's we can't change it. We could set it at 65, which would be the wrong thing to do because that's lower than the EPA. But it keeps the attention out there as we go through these plans that we've got these attainment goals that we have to meet. And our long-term highway plans ought to be looking at ways of reducing the potential for ozone.
I hear what you're saying, but from a practical standpoint, you're talking about goals or objectives. You're not going to change that unless you're going to change the climate. Okay. Now, that being said, I understand it'll pass, but I also think then we need to consider whether we want to, each city and county or collectively should, I think we should try to petition this up to the federal government. Now would be the time to reach out to elected officials at the federal level and say, please do something about this because it's just silly. It's just, the numbers, if you look at it, just doesn't make sense. It's not based on, it's not rational.
I will point out that the EPA is required to look at this standard every 5 years. The last time they did it was in 2015, so they'll be doing it again in 2020. And I believe the last time they looked at this standard, WAMPO submitted a comment regarding what the standard should be.
Well, I get that, but that level, is based for nationwide, and it's politically motivated, because there again, there is no requirement there be any correlation to any adverse health effects in the community that's going to be, it's just an arbitrary number for a very limited period of time. And so I am all for pushing back in multiple ways, one of which way is to vote no today. But I sincerely, I think that now is the time, when the time of deregulation and common sense regulation at the EPA, now's the time to try and push back and say, this doesn't make sense. We're spending time and resources doing stuff. Let's at least have a number that makes more sense and is actually related to health on the ground of the communities you're dealing with. Presumably, that's ultimately the goal, but if there is no connection, we don't have a health problem, we don't have an air quality problem, we have a regulation problem.
My concern is we say that we set this at 70 and told us that the results of that are that we would look and see what impact that our transportation plans have to reduce it. That's not a solution. That doesn't tell us what we're going to do. If we're going to set a goal and we want to meet that goal, what are we going to do if we don't meet that goal? And what your explanation is doesn't tell me what we're going to do if we don't meet that goal. I think we're wasting our time setting a goal if we don't have something that we're going to accomplish as a result of it.
Being fairly new to this, I just have a question. If I understood the conversation, discussion here, we as a board are not under any requirement to adopt this. Is that correct?
No, it's.
This is a recommendation from staff.
Well, from staff and from the TAC. From the TAC, our Transportation Advisory Committee.
Second question I have, if the board takes no action on this or does not set it, what are the ramifications? Because according to what I just heard you say, if we, the community, exceeds that 70, we still have to kick in the studies and do all the other stuff anyway. So my question is, what is the advantage for us as a board to adopt this? That's all I'm asking. Because I tend to agree with some of the conversation in that there's enough regulations out there, and if we don't need this one, then why are we doing it? That's my only thing. And once you put it on writing and you adopt it as a policy board, it becomes law. It becomes real. So I'm just asking for background.
Sure, the board is not obliged to adopt this. The staff and the TAC brought this forward because since we have the performance measure in Move 2040, it's good planning practice to set targets for your performance measures. Targets help give us context for how we're performing. But the board is not obliged to set that target or not set that target. And most of the consequences, all of the consequences basically for this flow from the EPA regulations rather than from our internal targets. So the setting the target is really a way of aligning our own expectations and goal with this regulation that's been imposed on us by the EPA.
So if we do not set 70 as the target or whatever, and we just say we don't want to set it, we're still going to monitor it, and then a year from now, we're going to look at a piece of paper that has a graph on it and says we're at 69 or 70 or whatever. And if we see we're going out of compliance, and at that point in time, we could start putting things into.
Yeah, I'll be coming back to you in November after the ozone season is over with this year's results.
So that would, we monitor it. If we don't put it down as our policy whether we do or not, I don't particularly care. But we don't have that regulation, as you stated, that we have to meet. It's just, it's kind of a guideline, and that we want to monitor. So if we do get out of compliance, then I think we did the education thing to try and, that's how we got people in compliance, wasn't it? Somewhat the last time.
I suspect of this change, some of it is driven by weather, as Richard was speaking about. A lot of it is driven by turnover in the automobile fleet, as newer vehicles emit less of the NOx and VOCs that contribute to this. That's probably behind a fair portion of this decline.
When does the new containment cycle start?
Well, like I said, the EPA is required to look at what the level is every 5 years. So they would have to do that again in 2020. And then after they reevaluate the level, whether they changed the level or not. So even if they kept it at 70, then they look at how everyone is performing compared to the target level and say, okay, you guys are in attainment, you guys are out of attainment. So it would probably come around 2022 is when we would hear one way or the other, based on the next cycle, as you were saying.
We got basically two options. One, we set the standard at 70 as recommended by TAC and staff, or we just say, we're going to monitor it. That's our two options. So motion for one or the other, or both.
We monitor it.
You move?
Second.
David, second by Jim. Was it Jim?
Yes.
Okay.
I think from a practical point, that's really what we're going to be doing anyway, is monitoring.
Right. We're just not putting a hard number to it. Is the way the motion reads, it's just monitor it and come back to us. Is there any other discussion?
One question before we vote.
Yes, sir.
Because of the process of setting targets as we've been going through with the multiple goals we put in place, if we choose not to set a target on this, does this require us to go back to the 2020 plan and somehow amend that? That doesn't require targets in these? Doesn't affect this vote, but this has been an ongoing process to get to this point. We've already got the measurement in the plan. The only thing we're doing today was trying to set the target. Just as a logistical question more than anything else, we still have a plan that says we have the target, now we just don't have a goal. Or is the goal simply going to read, it'll just be monitored with no?
We will still have the goal, we'll still have the performance measure, we just won't have a target for it. And having the target is best practice, but there's nothing that says in the plan or in the regulations that says we must have a target. It's possible this may end up being a footnote in our next certification review or something like that. But
that's exactly
there
where
is
I was
nothing
going.
forcing this board to
Every time
set
we
a
do the
target for this
certification,
measure.
we get into a situation where we say, this is what we will do, and the certification review says, you said you'd do it and you're not doing it. And so down the road somewhere, this is just going to come back as an administrative comment that we said we would do it and we had it, and then we're going to be responding to that, is my only point.
And I do want to just note, this is one of our targets, one of the Move 2040 targets. There's also many of the other targets I've come to you with are the federal targets, the MAP 21 targets. And for those, we are required to set targets for them. And I'll be coming back to you with some more of those later in the year. So I just want to make distinct, there are some where we have to set targets and some like this one where it's good practice, but we're not required to.
Got a motion and a second, just to monitor and set no number to the standards. Any other questions? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. We're good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Alrighty, moving along. Committee and partnership status reports. The executive committee did not meet this last month, so Tom, TAC?
I don't have anything that hasn't been covered today.
Thank you. Tom? Yep.
Oh, I don't have much of a report this time because most of our projects for this year have not begun, but of course we have 3 ongoing projects on US 54. On the 235 and Kellogg project, we have some closures coming up, of course, and I put out a weekly report, and if you would like to subscribe to that, just let me know. I can tell you what they are coming up on the weekend of March 23rd through the 25th. Maple Street will be closed. We've been working on expanding the bridges, the I-235 bridges over Maple Street, and they are now increased. So they need to go in there and strip all that construction work off of there. So it will close on the weekend of March 23rd, 25th. We wanted to do it this weekend, but this is a bad weekend to close something in Wichita. So we deferred to sanity there instead of madness. On April 2nd, northbound I-235 ramp to westbound 54. This is the northeast Cloverleaf will close and it will not reopen. As part of the rebuilding the ramp from westbound Kellogg to northbound I-235, we need to take that Cloverleaf out. It never comes back. but we have a better solution for it. We're just not ready to open the better solution yet. So it may not be the best of timing and the best of logistical, hey, we could do this in an order that made sense for the driver, but that's not the way it's gonna work out. So that will close on April 2nd and not reopen. We will mark a detour for northbound I-235 traffic that wants to go westbound US 54. They will get off to eastbound US 54, go to Edward Street, turn around, and then they're on westbound US 54. There are other ways to do it. You can also go up to Central, come back down, and get off onto the westbound US 54 ramp at the interchange. So, but our marked official detour will take them to eastbound Kellogg, to Edwards, to westbound US 54. So work continues on all those ramps, and we have other closures coming, but the end of this project is in sight. It looks to be next spring. We will stop in the area. This phase will be finished sometime next spring or summer. We're saying summer, but I think it'll be finished in the spring, just in time to start the project at the North Junction. Also, we have a new public affairs manager for the South Central region for KDOT. She is Deb Groover from Wichita. She works in Hutch. So she will take this chair as my, follow-up person? Alternate, thank you. So I will get that done with staff, and you will see her next month because I will not be here.
Thank you. Any questions, Tom? All right, other business? Anybody else? Tom?
I have one comment, and we had quite a bit of discussion today on EPA and the monitors. And just to keep everybody in mind where the monitor's at, one's in Peck, one's in Sedgwick, and one's at the
Health Department.
KU Health Department area down on 9th Street. The one in Peck and the one in Sedgwick go off when we fail, and the one down at the Health Department doesn't. That's kind of unusual. So when we fail because of heat, it's probably driven by something else. Just a little bit of trivia for everybody.
Anything else? We are adjourned.